And I think this one should be a familiar one for lots of you. Can I get a big Pergello from the Sydney community? Pergello! 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 So we're well represented today by the community in GY, or elected Tibetans who used to live in GY and have moved to Newcastle and Nowra and the surrounds. So you should all be very familiar with Dr. Sophie Scamps. Dr. Scamps is an independent member of Parliament and the member for McCallum, the Northern Beaches, and that's actually the largest Tibetan community in Australia. So she's representing a lot of Tibetans in Parliament. And she actually visited Dharamsala in April of 2023, and she's a regular participant in the all-party parliamentary Tibet support group that you heard about earlier from Senator Barbara Pocock. So she'll be part of that group today that's going to try to pass that motion. So I want you now to give a big welcome to Dr. Sophie Scamps.
Hello everyone, and welcome to all of you. This is a very auspicious, important day to be recognising 67 years since the Tibetan uprising. I want to say that here in Australia we are so proud of our Tibetan Australians and the way that you have continued to fight today for the freedom of your people in Tibet and of Tibet. We are also incredibly proud of your dedication and commitment to preserving and protecting your culture, your traditions, your philosophy, your religions, and also we thank you so much for sharing that with our Australian community. I think as was mentioned, I was extremely fortunate to have had a meeting with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala with another parliamentary delegation, and he did say that if there was one good thing that has come out of what has happened to Tibet, it is that the sharing of the incredible philosophy of the Tibetan people, Tibetan Buddhism. And for that, I think the world thanks you. There are so many of us around the world that have learnt so much from you, the Tibetan people, and your ongoing, enduring strength and spirit. So we do thank you. I want to say as well that I know how important it is that the Tibetan people choose the successor for His Holiness the Dalai Lama within the traditions of Tibet. We know that that is so important and it must happen. Yeah. I also understand that the situation in Tibet has probably never been worse in many ways when it comes to things like the children that are sent to the boarding schools and the eradication of your culture in terms of what's happening in those boarding schools. So what you're doing today by continuing to fight for Tibet, for your culture, for your traditions, is more important than ever. And we do recognise that, and we thank you for your strength and your endurance for continuing to fight for the freedom of Tibet. When I met with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he also spoke about the environmental destruction within Tibet and how important it is that that beautiful country of yours must be looked after and protected. And I have trust that the people of Tibet would do that beautifully. So just know that there are people inside the Australian Parliament who recognise the difficulties that the Tibetan people face and continue to face, that we understand some of what is happening inside Tibet, and that we are here to support you. I also know that this is a difficult time as many people, many Tibetan Australians here in Australia are unable to communicate with their families back in Tibet and how devastating that is. So our hearts are with you. We're very delighted that you found Australia to be a safe home. We are so pleased that you are sharing your culture with us, your traditions, your philosophy with us, and just know that we are here to support you going forward into the future. And I wish you all the best. Continue to do what you do, and that is to protect and preserve your wonderful traditions and culture. Keep up the fight, and thank you for being here today. Free Tibet!
Free Tibet!
Thank you, Dr. Scoms, and thank you for all the work you do with the All-Party Parliamentary Tibet Support Group. I've seen on Facebook that you attend the community events in your electorate. I've seen you at Tibetan New Year. So thank you for your contribution to supporting the preservation of Tibetan culture and all the work that you do for the local community. Thank you so much, Dr. Scoms. And it's my distinct pleasure now to invite Ms. Kate Chaney MP, an independent member from WA. Please welcome Kate Chaney.
Thank you very much. In December, I visited Dharamsala as a guest of the Australia-Tibet Council to meet His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama and to learn more about the ongoing occupation of Tibet by China. Meeting the Dalai Lama was a far more profound experience than I'd even expected. Here's a man who's spent his 90 years spreading a message of peace, harmony and humanity, despite facing extraordinary adversity. And he carries both a lightness and a gravity to him that are really hard to communicate. I met him with a group of parliamentarians from all over, from Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, France, Chile and other countries. And these were men and women who were accustomed to being listened to. They were a confident group. But in his presence, every one of us softened, and his warmth and humour and humility disarmed us, and many of us were moved to tears by his gentle humanity. And that moment reminded me of what it means to be human, our enormous capacity for compassion, but also our capacity to harm. And while I was there, I learned so much about the immense adversity that Tibetans have endured. I learned about Tibet's distinct and independent identity through its language and culture. And Tibetan, as you well would know, is one of the oldest languages emerging from the Indian Sanskrit tradition, not from China. And there's a long history of international relations between China and Tibet, well before there was a Chinese Communist Party. I learned about the central role the Dalai Lama plays for Buddhists all over the world. I learned about the oppression Tibetan people have faced since 1959 through violence and sinicization, and the systematic erosion of culture and religion. I learned about the ongoing human rights abuses, with up to 80% of Tibetan children removed from their families and placed into colonial-style boarding schools. I heard about forced labour framed as vocational training, restrictions on religious freedom, and the intentional, intergenerational and geographic severance that shapes current Chinese policies. I listened to stories from those who'd escaped Tibet, freedom fighters, followers of the Dalai Lama, and ordinary Tibetans who simply wish to live their life in peace and practice their faith and culture without fear. I learned about the Tibetan government in exile, which for decades has upheld democratic practices and maintained and protected the identity of the Tibetan people through gentle but firm resistance. I learned about Tibet as the third pole, an occupied country as vast as my state of Western Australia, the water tower of Asia, where ice is melting at twice its previous rate, where decisions about water affect a third of the world's population, and where China's plan for a mega dam will fundamentally alter the climate and reshape water politics across Asia. I learned about the precarious moment approaching as the 14th Dalai Lama moves into his 10th decade, with China claiming that his reincarnation will be in China and will be decided in a manner determined by the Chinese government. And I learned about transnational repression, how intimidation, surveillance and geopolitical pressure are used to silence dissent among cultural associations and diaspora groups, even beyond Tibet's borders. We're living through a fragile moment for the international rules-based order. Events in the Middle East are challenging assumptions about how the world works, and the critique voiced by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney that the system has become a fiction shows just how vulnerable it is. But we cannot give up on the international rules-based order. It may be imperfect, but without it we're left with nothing, and nothing is far worse. The rules-based order aligns with the Dalai Lama's message of peace and the belief that nations should resolve conflict through dialogue, not domination. It's about appealing to the best of humanity, not the worst. Australia has long played a constructive role in upholding the rules-based order, and we must continue to use every diplomatic tool available to defend human rights. Undermining the rules-based order threatens democracy, the rule of law, and the norms that keep communities safe here and around the world. And so today I urge the Australian government not to shy away from difficult issues, but to continue to remind our allies, trading partners, and all the countries of the world that we all benefit from freedom. China is an important trading partner, but economic relationships do not negate human rights responsibilities. We cannot turn a blind eye to what's happening to the Tibetan people. In our engagement with the Chinese government, Australia should express clear and principled concern about the Chinese government's repressive policies towards Tibet. Tibetan people deserve the same freedom to practice and preserve their culture and religion that we value for all Australians. Part of that religious freedom is the right to choose their own spiritual leader. The notion that the Chinese state would select the reincarnation of the 14th Dalai Lama seems preposterous to me. If China attempts this, we may face the damaging prospect of there being two Dalai Lamas, one recognised by Beijing, the other recognised by the Gaden Phojun Trust in line with Tibetan tradition and the 14th Dalai Lama's wishes. That path would create conflict for generations. Every government and institution can learn from the Dalai Lama's remarkable legacy. The Australian government should be urging China to return to the negotiating table, to find the middle way, an approach that seeks genuine autonomy and offers a peaceful and durable resolution. These are not radical demands. They are reasonable requests from the Tibetan people, grounded in the universal desire for dignity, and should be supported by the Australian government. I stand in solidarity with the Tibetan people today and every day. I call on the Australian government to use its voice, its influence and its diplomacy to support the Tibetan people in their struggle for cultural preservation, self-determination and religious freedom. Free Tibet.
Free Tibet!
Thank you, Kate, and thank you for those words. There was an incredibly comprehensive description of what's happening.